know me, then you'll know I'm an absolute sucker for unused content. I spent hours upon hours researching cut content from various games, and TF2, with its almost 11 active years and 9 development years of existence, is of course one of those. Today, I wanted to just talk about some interesting yet not too known pieces of scrapped content. I chose 10 pieces of content that I not only find very interesting, but also maybe a bit obscure, you could say, as opposed to some other pieces of scrapped content. So, sit back and enjoy me babbling on about 10 pieces of unused TF2 content. Let's start off with some MVM related items, since I've been playing a whole heck of a lot of MVM recently. In the game files, there's a single icon that exists that went unused that references some sort of blimp that was slated to appear in Manhattan. It's unknown how the blimp would have acted, but the best guess was that it was an alternate tank-like obstacle the players would have to shoot down due to the fact that there are several entities that make reference to a mini-tank, which doesn't actually exist. Because of that, the blimp is the best contender to being the mini-tank. Curious enough, Manhattan doesn't actually have tanks in its missions. That's one of the gimmicks. So it's neat to see that there may have been some form of alternate tank type that would have spawned, as opposed to just having the gate gimmick that's in the map today. This is something I would love to see someone interpret and implement into an MVM map. While the simplest thing to do would to basically be a alternate tank type, I'm sure someone can come up with a more creative function that could give it its own identity. I'm just not creative enough to do so and haven't really thought about it. Also in MVM, there's a somewhat unused class of robots that would have basically been punch-happy heavy dwarves. The heavy Mittens would have been 35% smaller with a 60 HP health pool to boot. That wielded the holiday punch with a 100% chance to crit. They are literally just dwarves running around making people laugh, and I'm so sad they were cut from the game. While this specific type was shot down, there is a variation of the heavy Mittens that exists within only a handful of waves in data demolition. The difference between the in-game heavy Mittens and the scrapped ones is that the implemented ones lack the size reduction and, of course, the cosmetics that tie it all together. They can't be punch-happy dwarves without a fantasy-styled hat and a luscious beard. I'm both sad and glad this variation didn't officially make it in, because while it's a bummer that we don't get to fight dwarves that force you to laugh, I'm glad we don't have to fight dwarves that make you laugh. I've got mixed feelings about this, okay? One of the saddest cut content to me was the really catchy upgrade station music that I'm sure most of you are aware of. If you're unaware though, there was originally supposed to be this small loop of elevator-like music that would play while the player was at or near the upgrade station. Even though it was removed from functioning in the standard game, it still exists within the files. While I personally am really sad to see this cut, I can understand why they might have thrown this in the let's not use this pile. Considering it's only a minute long, that would have played every time a player used the upgrade station. It had the possibility to become quite annoying. On my TF2 server, I personally opted into using a plugin that plays the upgrade station music while in the spawn areas of the maps. So if you join my server, I sure hope you don't mind hearing that music every time you spawn. Okay, that was the Intruder Alert MIDI version where literally every single instrument is performed as a piano. This thing's still in the game files, and I don't know why it exists, but my best guess is that it was used to sort of lay out what they actually wanted for the final Intruder Alert when the Valve Orchestra got together, but that's about all I can guess. It's the only one of its kind in the files, it's the only MIDified version, and it's not the best song to have been put into a MIDI format. Oh, the Pyro sitting taunt. How I wish you made it in. I guess we got a variation of it, but just look at the faux innocence of this indistinguishable gendered person. It needed to be in the game. This taunt was very obviously inspired from the True Meaning comic where Engie was telling Pyro a story. The taunt was removed from the SFM files at some point a few years ago, I believe around 2015, so it's no longer accessible by default. However, take that statement with a grain of salt, cause I'm quite unsure about it. Alright, onto the unused weapons and stuff. First up, we have the most well-known and prominent unused engineer building, the Repair Node. The Repair Node would have been a building replacement for either the teleporter or dispenser that would have repaired nearby buildings. The files still exist within the game, but it's in an unfinished state. The textures are either very, very basic, or completely missing altogether. A fully textured version was never released, but it was shown in the background of the Engineer Update teaser, like a lot of other teasers. However, some fan-made textures have been made to show what the Repair Node likely would have looked like when in use. The building was cut for some pretty good reasons though, the reasons being that it made Nest harder to take down, and the fact that the lack of either a dispenser or a teleporter really showed how important those two buildings were. This is one of the few gameplay elements that was actually explained as to its removal, and is one that I agree with, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't want to see it in-game and functioning just for the fun of it. As a quick aside though, the attempt with the Repair Node is likely why Valve has never really added in another engineer building. It's arguable that the engineer's buildings are one of the hardest gameplay elements to balance due to the impact that they can have, aside from Medic Supercharge. The Repair Node showed exactly what would happen if players had a choice to replace either the teleporters or the dispensers, and it was too drastic of a change to properly balance and warranted replacing altogether. It's probably why we've only ever seen a Sentry replacement in the form of the Mini Sentry, and even then, people have still complained about its inclusion in the years it's existed. A while back, when there was evidence of a Spy vs. Engie update, I believe there was also some files that referred to some other engineer buildings, but I honestly was unable to find any concrete evidence of this, so like the last point, take this statement with a cup of salt. Now here's an interesting weapon. For what would eventually become Bonk, at least according to the wiki, we originally had a secondary scout weapon that was a backpack. This backpack would have allowed Scout to pick up health and ammo packs from around the map, carry them around and drop them off for teammates. It's an interesting concept that would have given Scout a more supportive role, and considering Scouts already have a tendency to steal health packs from players, it would make sense. However, I could see this item having been very easily abused for trolling. Just imagine that annoying lime green scout who thinks he's so cool and taunts after every kill, equipping this item for the sole reason of stealing health packs and ammo packs from teammates in need, just because he felt like he was the big man on campus and had some power. I'm pretty glad this thing didn't make it in. Before Demo was given his all-important sticky bomb launcher, he instead toted around a large dynamite pack that he could throw that exploded twice, one with an initial explosion that blows up the individual sticks apart, and a second that detonates each of the individual sticks. This was one of the few pieces of cut content that was actually seen in the very first trailer for the TF2 we know today, and in fact it started off as Demo's grenades, before the grenades were scrapped, thank god, where it was moved to act as a secondary until it was ultimately cut in favor for the all-important sticky bomb launcher. There are actually plugins that reintroduce the Dynamite Pack into servers as a sort of added ability for Demo, and for a while I did actually have it on my own server for a time, before deciding to remove it. I found the Dynamite Pack could just be thrown in the middle of a fray with very little to no players realizing it had been thrown, which often resulted in players getting caught in an explosion they had no idea was ever going to happen. It often got lost in the clutter of battle. While a neat concept, it's a very good thing it was replaced by the sticky launcher in the end, because that thing is an invaluable piece of Demo's kit, and we all know what happened when Valve attempted to nerf it. This is a catcher's mitt. It's used in baseball. This used to be a scout weapon. No, this is not the specific one because I couldn't actually find a model for it, so just imagine it's in TF2's art style. Anyhow, this melee item would have allowed Scout to catch enemy projectiles and throw them back at the enemy for the full amount of damage. Sound familiar? It's not hard to guess what this ended up becoming, and thank god it did. Not only is Pyro's Air Blast an absolute godsend to have been put into the game, since up until then Pyro could literally just WM1 and not much else. However, just imagine a hop-happy Scout constantly just throwing back a soldier's rockets. I personally think that the catcher's mitt would have given Scout a little too much utility, while Pyro was just sort of sitting there with the ability to M1, and that's about it. I mean, even though Pyro now has M2 capabilities, it's not like a whole lot of people utilize it anyhow. The last piece of content that I want to show you is an entire map redesign. We all probably know Badlands at this point. It's a popular and decently made map that's been around since TF2's baby days. However, there were some concept art pieces that showed a completely different Badlands than what we were given. This Badlands would have featured spirals a bit more prominently than they are on the final design. Overall, though, it was much more akin to the TFC Badlands design, which was made as a capture the flag map. The reason I chose to include this one is because this map has actually been recreated. Although it's not CTF, and in that case isn't the most accurate recreation, it's still a very good replica of what could have been and what was extracted from the few screenshots we did get. So those are 10 unused and fairly obscure pieces of TF2 content. What piece of unused content is your favorite? Let me know in a comment below, and as always, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.